Have you ever wondered about limerence, why it is that you have this pattern of thinking that the limerent object is just absolutely incredible, gorgeous, amazing, so intelligent, it's just wow, you could really have that sense of, I just put them completely on a pedestal. And have you ever thought to yourself, like, what is that? What am I doing? Why do I have this kind of real intense connection to them in this way? So if you're resonating with that, I hope that what I have will be helpful today. What I'm going to look at is defense mechanisms. I'm going to be looking at projection, because this is the kind of the key defense mechanism that you're going to be using if you have idealization. And then I'm going to look at what to do with this, if you recognize yourself in this particular pattern. Okay, so the idealization that we're talking about, this kind of sense of like, wow, 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 wow. And it really does feel like that. And it's often immediate. You meet somebody and it's just this incredible attachment that you feel towards them. And where this particular pattern is coming from is the defense mechanism, like I said, that's called projection. If you know anything about defense mechanisms, you'll know that originally they were identified by Sigmund Freud. And then Sigmund Freud's daughter, Anna Freud, started to kind of really analyze them, pick them apart, kind of make sense of them. And the modern version of the defense mechanisms that I use in my work has come from Claudio Naranjo and his work on the DSM, which is really fantastic work. I absolutely love the way that he kind of picks apart the defense mechanisms and makes sense of them in terms of how they impact your personality. And when it comes to projection, what's happening with projection is that you're trying to cope with an internal confusion about being good or being bad. So if I can give you an example of what happens here. Say I am a child and I feel some kind of abandonment. Now, with projection, you're often responding to some kind of abandonment, and it's usually around the fear of not having enough support or guidance. This is an abandonment fear. And when the child fears that they're not getting enough support or guidance, because you're little, it's very easy to blame yourself. It feels like it's my fault. I've done something wrong. I'm bad. I've done something terrible. This is why I'm not getting the support that I need. This is why I feel abandoned. Now, it's too much for a child to manage the feeling of being bad. It's overwhelming to us as little children to kind of really deal with this. So one way that we can try and manage this awful feeling of being bad is to push it outside of ourselves. And the way that we push it ourselves outside of ourselves is by projection. I can't speak today. We project. So if I'm little and I'm feeling like I'm really bad, one thing that I can do is I can take all of my bad feelings and I can put them onto somebody else. And I can think to myself, I feel bad because you are bad. It's to do with you. You are the reason that I don't feel good. And so then the way that I can manage that internal confusion around my badness is to say to myself, there are bad people and there are good people. And if I'm around good people, I will feel good. And if I'm around bad people, I will feel bad. So what that makes me do then as a child is to become obsessed with seeking for good people and bad people. And I think to myself as a child, if I find the good people, everything will be okay. I can trust them. Everything is all right. Now, if I feel that meet the bad people, if I can't figure out who's good and who's bad and I get it wrong, I'm going to feel bad because the people are bad. And what that does is it protects me internally from having to deal with being bad. It makes me feel that badness is outside of myself. The other thing that it's doing is that it's making me very vulnerable to people outside of myself. The defense mechanisms don't fully work for us. They kind of work, but they always kind of cause us problems as well, unfortunately. This is one reason that we need to examine them when we're adults, because I'm putting all of my energy into searching outside of myself for what feels good or what feels bad. So internally, I feel safer when I do this. I feel like I'm doing the right thing. I'm looking for the good people. I don't have to think whether I'm good or bad. I don't have to worry about that. I'm okay. All I need to do is get the right person. And so, of course, if you have this as a child, then what happens when you meet someone who you feel is a good person, then you feel amazing. You feel, oh, I found someone who's safe and I can ask them for lots of reassurance and I can connect to them, and your attachment becomes very intense. So this is absolutely where the idealization pattern is coming from. It's coming from a really, really young place of I've found a safe person, This person can reassure me. I can get everything from this person. And what it does is it keeps you in a position of infantilization. And what I mean by that is it keeps you in a place of feeling like a child because it feels like somebody else can make you feel good. Someone else is responsible for how you feel. And obviously, in many ways, as children, this is true. We are completely dependent on our caregivers when we're really little. So you can see why a child would do this. It kind of happens automatically for many people, projection. So that's kind of really what happens to you. Um, and when you kind of grow up, when you become an adult, also this happens in adolescence, actually, this kind of the intensity of projection. It's not just about a good person, it then becomes a very attractive person, the feelings of kind of searching for this good person, the idealization, and it becomes connected to sex, it becomes connected to romance. You romanticize and sexualize this connection to someone. So it becomes even more powerful for you. So you found a good person and you found a person that you are sexually attracted and romantically attracted to. So it's very, very powerful, And unexamined, this can be the pattern that kind of follows you all the way through into adulthood when it comes to relationships. There was the limerent longing for this idealized version. Now, the other thing is there's a lot actually in terms of projection and how it can impact you. The other thing that can happen is that you have this deep split between a good person and a bad person. Now, what happens to you if your limerent object does something that shatters your belief in them as being good? Well, this is unbearable to you because immediately what happens is they go from being a good object to a bad object. This is the feeling of betrayal that you can often have if they do something that's not perfect. And of course, the idea of the perfectly good object is coming from when you were really little. It's not something that adults really kind of have unless they've got this kind of split from childhood. So if your limerent object suddenly does something that feels wrong or bad, there is no grey area with this kind of good bad split. Suddenly they are bad, and you can feel devastated, and you can feel deeply, deeply betrayed, and you can also feel like you didn't expect it. You did not see it coming. And this is usually because of the idealized version of the person that you have. So you can be very vulnerable. There can be a naivety to you if you have this kind of good bad split. And there also can be, alongside naivety, which is very interesting, deep suspicion. Deep suspicion of people because there's this sense of if I get it right, everything is okay. If I get it wrong and I attach to the wrong person, everything will be bad and I will feel absolutely terrible. And like I said, if somebody switches from being a good person to a bad person, this can be very shocking to you. I do find with clients who are anxious preoccupied that they don't often have that split. They often have the kind of idealized version and it can last for a long, 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 long time. If someone is fearful avoidant, there's more likely that they'll have this shift between a good object and a bad object in the same person. One time they'll think that their limerent object is very good and wonderful and idealized, and then the next moment they're devaluing them and discarding them. So you really will see that with fearful, whereas with the anxious preoccupied pattern, it's usually just idealization. Please let me know if that feels different for you in terms of being anxious preoccupied. I'd love to hear from you, actually. It'd be very interesting to kind of to know your story. So what do you do with this? How do you kind of shift this? Because if you have a sense of like your limerent object being perfectly good, it's very hard to shake it. It's very difficult because it feels like all of your thoughts naturally kind of go to, wow, this person is amazing and wonderful and incredible. So what's very useful in this is to understand the process of the defense mechanism and how it's protecting you from the core fear. So like I said, your defense mechanisms, they are defenses. We are protecting ourselves with them. So projection is actually protecting you from that deep internal fear of, am I bad? Is this why I haven't been supported? Is this why I've been abandoned? So what's going to happen to you when you start to process that core fear is that you will feel very unsafe. It's very frightening to experience this, even as an adult, when you're going back and you're processing old emotion, it is difficult and painful to let yourself feel this. So, as I always say, being incredibly kind to yourself when you do it and get as much support as you possibly can. And the withdrawal process from limerence fundamentally is about grieving. That's what it is. So you are grieving the loss of not having the support, not having the guidance that you really needed in childhood. You're really grieving that abandonment. And it's agony. I wish I could make it less painful for clients, but I can't. It really, if you've had some kind of rejection or abandonment in childhood, this is the work that you're going to have to kind of work through that. Yeah, I wish I had something, and I know I don't. All I can do is kind of really be present with clients when they experience this and reassure them that this stage is temporary. It's not going to go on forever. You get to actually process that awful feeling in early childhood. And what that does when you process it is that the desire for limerence falls away, that there's that real sense of I don't need it. I don't need the reassurance in the same way. And you have a real sense of power and agency that comes back. That sense of, oh, I have my own back. I can take care of myself. I don't have to rely on another person externally to take care of me. And fundamentally, what happens is you grow up. You move out of infantilization, because infantilization, this is what happens to you when you use this particular defense mechanism. Because if I'm projecting, everything else that's bad, everything that is good, is to do with someone else. So my happiness depends on another person, and my pain depends on another person. A person is good because they've taken care of me. A person is bad because they've hurt me. Now, in many ways, as a child, you do believe this. You do have the sense of like, if I feel bad, it's because you're bad. you know, if I feel good, it's because you're good. But obviously, as an adult, you start to examine this and realize, oh, actually, it's not always like this. Somebody can do something that I feel hurt by, and it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. And somebody can do something that makes me feel good, and it doesn't mean they're a good person. People are much more complex than that. And working through projection so that you can get to the core fear allows you to be more complex too. You may have a great deal of fear around being a bad person. It's often what happens if you're anxious. You tend to think that you're a bad person. You tend to think that you're unlovable. And you tend to also have this deep sense of, I don't feel safe. I don't feel that I can manage my own emotion, and working on that core fear really shifts this. And you're allowed to be complex, okay? You really are allowed to be complex. You do not have to be perfectly good. I don't know anybody who's perfectly good. It's only this kind of sense from childhood of like, I've got to be good, I've got to be good. It really is the preoccupation in many ways of someone who's anxious. You won't find that with dismissive avoidance. It's very different. They have less concern really about being a good person. But if you're anxious preoccupied, it's very important to you that you are good. And so I can say to you that you are good enough. You absolutely are good enough. That kind of intense fear of badness is coming from that place when you were really little of I'm a bad kid. It may have been that somebody actually told you that you were bad, and this is why you have the kind of the anxiety about it. So working on that core fear, really allowing yourself to process that abandonment, that is going to shift this. And you're going to be good enough at the end, as you should be. Like I said, nobody has to be perfect. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that kind of will be useful for your own inner work in terms of working with your therapist. There are many defense mechanisms, and all of the defense mechanisms that we use, they are the engine of addiction. My background is in addiction recovery, and that's when I'm working with a client who has addiction issues. We're looking at how are you defending against your core fear? Because like I said, the way that you're defending, this is going to be how you are in addiction. And so with limerence and projection, it is that idealized version. And you also may have an experience of hate limerence. There's not a better phrase for that, unfortunately. I wish there was. We need to come up with one. But that can happen as well, the idealized version, and then the version, the hated object, that sense of you betrayed me, you've harmed me, and therefore everything that is wrong and bad is to do with you. You will be able to see that split prior to the early work. Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for watching this.